Uh, yeah, okay. So yeah. I have like other things that's like maybe are not as depressing. I don't fucking know. Um, I don't fucking know. Let's check. So there's like this mysterious video uh called 2000 point. So I don't know what it is, but I want to know. I want to know. There's a lot of views. It is like the type of stuff that like I really like. So let's check it out. It's called 2000 point. No clue. I didn't watch what it is. Okay.
2000 was an exciting year. It was 1990 no more, and a whole new millennium beckoned with potential. It was a transitional year for gaming too. A generation of consoles was coming to an end, and the battlegrounds were littered with failed machines. The 3DO, the Sega Saturn, the Atari Jaguar. It wasn't a console war, it was a massacre. Nintendo were still standing. Their N64 had found a family-friendly niche, particularly in the...
Bro, this fucker put a fucking soundtrack that is too much of a banger for me to like listen to the video like like watch the video like a normal person. Good on you, but fuck you anyway, dude. Like this. That's why you don't put songs too good when you fucking do a video.
The American market. A steady stream of Mario games helped, and 2000 gave us Paper Mario, Mario Tennis, and Mario Party 3. One of the biggest N64 releases was Zelda Majora's Mask, a follow-up to the hugely successful Ocarina of Time, and while Majora's Mask didn't sell quite as well, it garnered critical acclaim and a cult following.
Fuck your banger. Trying to listen.
Rare released Perfect Dark, a spiritual successor to GoldenEye. It lacked the Bond license but didn't lack ambition. The game pushed the hardware to its limits. The visuals were very impressive, but the frame rate less so. Compared to other platforms, the N64 had relatively few releases, but the games that were released were generally of a high standard. It was the home of the big mascot games, like Banjo-Tooie, Kirby 64. But the biggest franchise at this time was Pokemon. In 2000, Pokemon Stadium released in America and Europe, and quickly became the best-selling console.
I actually at Pokemon Stadium on fucking N64, I never managed to fucking finish the game, and I finished every other fucking Pokemon games that I had, like from like Red, Blue, and like Crystal, and like the first and second generation. I got this game, I got fucked up. I was never able to fucking finish it. I was so sad.
Game that year. It sold 1 million copies in its first month. The only thing that could outsell Pokemon Stadium was Pokemon Gold and Silver for the Game Boy Color.
Yeah, Gold and Silver.
Its first day of release, it sold 1.4 million copies.
So good.
Its first few weeks in the US, it sold 2.9 million. 12% of all video games sold this year were Pokemon titles. This was good for Nintendo, as they were facing strong competition in the console space. Mobile gaming was still in its infancy, and the only realistic option for handheld play was the Game Boy. Pokemon was huge, and so...
And also, when it comes to like gaming, Game Boys were actually like the reasonable price for gaming back in the day, because like well, console prices didn't really change. Like it went like it was as expensive as it is right now. Like right now it became more expensive, but like it was as expensive, and the Game Boy was actually quite the fucking like good option. Nintendo DS like had a similar moment, but compared to a fucking like PlayStation 2 or like fucking GameCube or whatever the fuck, well, it was a little bit later, but like even to an N64, a fucking Game Boy was so fucking like economical. So yeah, anyway.
Nintendo dominated the handheld market. Nothing else came close to the sales of Gold and Silver, but there were a few other notable releases for the Game Boy Color. Metal Gear Solid was the handheld debut of the Metal Gear series. Wario Land 3 continued the handheld exclusive games featuring Wario.
I had Wario. I had like a Wario game. I was never able to finish. It was a mess. It was really difficult as a fucking platformer.
So, while Nintendo were buoyed by their handheld...
There was like also like a Harry Potter Final Fantasy type of like game that was really fucking fun. I remember on my fucking Game Boy. Like what else there was? Like what else did I played? I don't fucking remember. I think that's all I played. Like Pokemon, and a couple other games, but like and Mario, right?
success, the N64 wasn't as secure in the market as they might have hoped. With a new generation looming, Nintendo were no doubt planning how to take on their biggest rival. 5 years into its life, the Sony PlayStation was still doing numbers. It had outsold the N64 by a ratio of 2-1 and was dominant in the European and Japanese markets. Thanks to its popularity in Japan, CD-ROM storage and support from Square, it was the place for JRPGs. Final Fantasy IX, Vagrant Story, and Dragon Quest VII all released this year. In theory, the N64 was the more powerful platform, but hamstrung by cartridge size and memory latency, the PlayStation kept pace in the 3D stakes. Third-person action games like Siphon Filter 2 were standard fare. First-person shooters like Medal of Honor Underground tapped into the rising popularity of shooters on consoles. The textures were low-res, the polygon count low, and the controls often clunky. But this was the generation where 3D graphics became the expected norm. 3D opened up the potential for new genres and allowed home consoles to offer arcade-like experiences. The PlayStation had established itself as the home of driving games. It had Gran Turismo after all. It had variety too, from serious driving simulators like Colin McRae Rally 2.0 to the crime.
And like during this generation, fuck, it was for me. It was not like I was not a Need for Speed baby, but like I was not a Need for Speed fan, but a Burnout fan. Like if you never played Burnout, you need to play Burnout, or like at least Need for Speed. It's such good games. It's such good games when it comes to driving.
And fueled Driver 2. If you were a sports fan, PlayStation had all of the big yearly franchises: NFL, NHL, FIFA. Skateboarding games were surprisingly popular at this time. The Tony Hawk series was topping the charts, and the release of the sequel elevated skateboarding to new heights. The explosion in extreme sports led to imitators like Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX and set the stage for similar games on the forthcoming generation. While Nintendo had the lion's share of mascot-led games, there were a few family-friendly titles that intruded on Nintendo's turf. The Spyro series had its third entry with Spyro Year of the Dragon, a cutesy 3D platformer. And the popular Crash Bandicoot series had Crash Bash, a party game in the Mario Party mold. In short, the PlayStation had more games suitable for more ages. The games were cheaper, cooler, and more varied than anything else on offer.
Yeah, but also less influential. And this is like where, like, to be honest, like you remember every fucking let's be honest, like Nintendo released like 4 or 5, let's make it large, 10 games, right? In there that are like important, but the 10 games are life changing to people. And it's kind of the same with Xbox, like where Halo, my favorite my favorite fucking FPS military franchise, right? Is like something that is so life changing for so many people. By the way, Cortana, best girl.
It also helped that it was easy to find pirated games. Sony were newcomers to the console scene, and in less than one generation had installed themselves as king. And if that wasn't enough, they were preparing to unleash a devastating blow to their rivals. Meanwhile, the PC was doing quite well. While the console wars were brutal, computers had long since consolidated to IBM compatibles. The closest rival was Apple, who had been struggling for years and were only starting to make a recovery. As far as
Can you fucking believe that this was a fucking like ad? What you just saw was an ad for like fucking Apple. Yeah, times were different. Well, yeah. People were kind of unhinged, you know, like.
computer gaming was concerned, the PC was the only choice. And over the last decade, they had become a common purchase for the home. So with an install base in the tens of millions, there was a sizable audience for PC games. The biggest selling PC game of 2000 was The Sims, a life simulator game from the creator of SimCity. It was a unique game that appealed to an unusually wide audience, and it did rather well as a result, selling 6.3 million copies by 2002. There were many expansion packs and sequels that followed. Another hotly anticipated game was action RPG Diablo 2, Blizzard's follow-up to 1997's Diablo. RPGs had long been a staple of PC gaming, and Blizzard had a great reputation at the time with the success of Warcraft and Starcraft. So, it's perhaps unsurprising that Diablo 2 ended up as the fastest-selling computer game ever. CRPG players were spoiled for choice, really. This year also had Baldur's Gate 2 from BioWare and Icewind Dale from Black Isle. Another classic PC genre was strategy, and one of the highlights of the year was Shogun Total War, a meaty slice of turn-based planning with 3D real-time battles and the opening entry of the Total War series. The popular Command & Conquer series had a return to form with Red Alert 2.
Oh, Red Alert. Dude, this man just hits the feelings. These games were so fucking good. God damn. Like, come on and conquer. Like, I even bought the Tiberium Wars, like, where actually, like, they add third or fourth. It was a third, like an alien race to it. It was like, but god damn, these games were something else.
Divisive Tiberian Sun, the alternate Cold War setting was welcomed, although it wasn't quite as good as the original. 3D stealth action games were en vogue too, likely due to the popularity of Metal Gear Solid. IO Interactive gave us Hitman Codename 47, an open-ended assassinate 'em up. And Looking Glass Studios released Thief 2: The Metal Age, a Hail Mary from a struggling studio which, despite critical acclaim and healthy sales, failed to save the company from bankruptcy. One key advantage of PC gaming that the consoles hadn't yet usurped was online play. The internet was rapidly becoming more and more popular, and for most people, the first, if not the only, device to be connected was the PC. Games like Quake 3 Arena, Unreal Tournament, and Team Fortress Classic had installed themselves as online essentials, and this was the year that Counter-Strike made its debut.
Can you believe that like the first online games were like not like there was no battle, like there was no price to pay to play online with friends, and then it became something normal to fucking pay to play online in multiplayer games. Like as someone who played like first like multiplayer, and then it was like you have to pay, yeah. And this norm actually never fucking changed. Like, if you want to play on the fucking Xbox and play multiplayer, you have to pay. And so it's insane. It's insane, like how they were able to market this as it is necessary because like the because fuck you. That's the right answer. Because fuck you, we can. Like, and that like is it never changed.
Backed by Valve and the Half-Life name, it found instant popularity. The realm-based tactical FPS remained popular for years afterwards, topping play count rankings. The PC market was challenging, however. The sheer breadth of software available meant that many games, no matter how critically acclaimed, didn't sell particularly well. Take Deus Ex, for instance, a first-person action RPG that was hailed as the pinnacle of PC gaming, festooned with awards, and retaining a cult following today. It sold about 138,000 copies in the US in its first year. There was a lot of competition for shelf space, and the big boxes didn't help. The PC market had a lack of cohesion, and the consoles were starting to gain ground. Even PC stalwarts like
It's just that like overall it never changed the logic. A PC was always like more expensive than a console, so and a PC you have to like the PC you have to fucking understand what the fuck you're doing. The console, like let's think about the average fucking player. The average fucking player doesn't know how to fucking install a fucking game, okay? Especially like back in the 2000s. You buy a console, you buy a game, and it works. You can play. You buy a PC, you buy a game. What the fuck am I supposed to do? What the fuck? I don't know. And this is the actual argument on why consoles actually became more popular, because like people right now people are getting used to, and it became quite easy to install games on a computer. To install World of Warcraft, my favorite game back in the day, you had 5 CDs that you needed to put in your computer, one after the other. And don't mess it up, because or else you have to do it again. And then you can play the game. No, I'm just joking. You have to do the account. And then you can play the game. No, you need to fucking like add the this serial number to your account. And then you can play the game. No, because after that you need to add the code for like the your monthly code to play to for like the sub, right? And then you can play a game. And then you can play the game. But like compared to, hey man, console, I bought it and I bought the CD and I put the CD and let's play it. Like yeah, that's why. Not because it was like too complicated or because the market or whatever. It's just like the average player is not a fucking programmer or a fucking like super prodigy genius. You get it?
Like the point-and-click adventure were struggling. The golden era of LucasArts was over, replaced with an endless string of Star Wars games. Many great PC exclusives of this era failed to gain the traction they deserved. The operative, No One Lives Forever, was a deft blend of camp 60s espionage with first-person stealth action, and it was very good. It received critical acclaim, with some reviewers comparing its innovations to those made in Half-Life. It sold 36,000 copies. Of course, some flops were more deserving than others. Daikatana came out this year too. It was supposed to be the next big FPS from John Romero to exceed Doom and Quake. A promise the game couldn't uphold.
Usually, coming from someone who plays video games, who criticizes video games, who is into like game design and all these subjects, like I never created a game myself. People usually, if a game, like if the game, the producers or if the people who make the game say that this is the game that will be better than another game, usually it's always a flop. It's always a failure, because like when it comes to gaming, it's kind of like art. The people, like the dude that tells you I am like my music is all about being a music better than a better Metallica or a better Eminem or a better, I don't fucking know, a better Madonna, usually it sucks. You know why? Because usually like the people who fucking focus on that as an argument, like also use this argument when creating their own art, their music, etc. You get me? I don't know if you did, but like if you did, you get me.
Iron Storm forecasted sales of 2.5 million, but its poor reviews scuppered any chance of a hit. It sold just over 8,000 PC copies in the US in its first few weeks. History remembers it as one of the biggest commercial failures of the era. There was just no room for mediocrity. The PC had more games available than any other platform, but players didn't have bottomless wallets. 7 out of 10 isn't good enough when the shelves are filled with 8s, 9s, and 10s. So the PC needed a new approach to selling games, one more flexible and with fewer overheads than retail. But until that solution arrived, AAA game development would become increasingly centered on the consoles. The worst was yet to come. The next generation of consoles had just arrived, eroding the PC's graphical advantage. The new hardware was ever more capable of handling 3D graphics, and provisions were made to satisfy the rising popularity of online play. The next gen was a threat. First to market was Sega's Dreamcast, launched the previous year. Sega had struggled during the last generation, with a lukewarm reception to the Saturn and an
Sega
failed add-ons for the Mega Drive. With Sony taking pole position, Sega couldn't afford any more mistakes. The Dreamcast was developer-friendly, able to port both PC and arcade games easily. It was powerful, came equipped with a modem, and the price was fair. It felt fresh and new, and had a fantastic array of colourful, interesting games. It had a good start. Crazy Taxi was a perfect port of the arcade original, a fast-paced, zany 3D drive-em-up where you have to deliver passengers to their destination as quickly as possible. It was a must-have. It showed off the next generation's capability and tapped into a cultural vibe in a way that few games can. The cel-shaded Jet Set Radio was similarly cool, an urban grind-em-up with jet-powered inline skates and a killer soundtrack. Weirder still was Space Channel 5, a campy rhythm game where you repel an alien attack by matching actions. It's got a cool 60s sci-fi theme, and Michael Jackson even makes a cameo. Most baffling of all was Seaman, which released in North America this year. I'm not sure what drove Sega to make such weird games, but I'm glad they did. There was nothing else quite like it, and the Dreamcast needed a strong array of games to stand a chance. Exclusives were a big deal, and while Sega may not have had Mario, the Dreamcast was the only place you could play Sonic Adventure. It was also home to Shenmue, which released in the West this year. An ambitious action-adventure life simulator game that was the most expensive video game ever developed at the time. It was good, certainly unique, but not quite good enough to recoup its costs, despite selling 1.2 million copies. Still, it was only on Dreamcast at the time, so it served as a pretty good incentive to adopt the system. The PlayStation may have had Gran Turismo, but the Dreamcast offered a strong alternative in Metropolis Street Racer, a racing game with an open world and innovative kudos scoring system. In fact, the Dreamcast had most of the PlayStation favourites covered. There was a port of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, and it had its own exclusive version of Resident Evil with Code Veronica.
I actually thought of the Dreamcast as a giddy console that actually got released and died within within a couple months after release. I didn't thought they went this far. It's not far-fetched from the reality. The Dreamcast died really fast, but I didn't thought that they had this many games and this many supported interesting games at all.
There were a slew of sports games, with all of the major sports covered. Some major franchises were notably absent, but passable alternatives existed. Honestly, the Dreamcast had a really solid library, especially considering how young the console was. But despite their best efforts, Sega couldn't instill confidence in the Dreamcast's future. EA weren't interested in developing for the platform, nor Squaresoft. The Dreamcast was good, great even, but it wasn't a PlayStation. Sony had built a very powerful brand over the last few years. In a time awash with bad decisions and risky purchases, the PlayStation was always a safe bet. And now, it was time for the PlayStation 2. The PS2 launched in March in Japan, October in North America, and the following month in Europe. Anticipation was sky high, with PS2 scarce on shelves and $250 million in revenue taken on the first day alone. 1.4 million were sold in Japan in its first month, and 10.6 million consoles globally in its first year. Sega already knew they were in trouble, but the strength of PlayStation sales by the end of the year made it clear that they couldn't continue. So soon, the PS2 was left standing as the only next-gen console on offer. It was the logical choice. It could play DVDs after all, and cost about the same as a standalone DVD player anyway. Unusually for a new console, it was backwards compatible with the original PlayStation, so you could carry on playing your favourites until something new arrived. The complement of launch games for the PS2 was a mixed bag. Enough to cover most genres, but the best was still on the way. The annual sports games were perhaps the most important for the launch checklist. EA had the NFL, NHL and FIFA franchises ready to kick off the next generation. More interesting was SSX, a snowboarding title that scratched the same extreme itch as the Tony Hawk series. It was originally a Dreamcast title, but after EA lost confidence in Sega's console, development shifted to the PS2. Driving games were another important part of the PS2's launch lineup. The next Gran Turismo was a year away, so in the meantime there were a few other next-gen options. Ridge Racer 5 was an arcade racer from Namco, praised for its tight racing and next-gen visuals, but criticised for a lack of anti-aliasing and limited content. Rockstar Games were gearing up to dominate the new generation and had 2 racing games on offer ready for launch. Midnight Club Street Racing was a city-focused game with illegal races between exotic imports. Smuggler's Run was an off-road expedition with buggies and other rough-and-tumble vehicles. Fighting games were another popular genre. Tekken Tag Tournament was a spin-off from the popular Tekken series with a new team fighting mechanic. Dead or Alive 2 Hardcore was an updated version of the arcade game for the PS2, regarded as the best of the genre at the start of the generation.
If you didn't notice, the background sound right now playing is "Oops, I Did It Again" by I don't remember. What's the name of the girl? Fuck. Britney Spears, right? Britney Spears. Take the time to just listen, and you'll, if you know the song, you'll recognize it.
The new and exciting first-person shooter genre was starting to make headway on consoles, with the PS2 receiving a port of Unreal Tournament. Not a patch on the PC original, but it's hard to beat local multiplayer action.
Oops, I did it again.
Splitters was much better received. Its varied gunplay and characters meshed with better suited gameplay to the console. For third-person shooting action, you had Armored Core 2, a mecha game by From Software. Dynasty Warriors 2 was a large-scale strategic hack and slash. The PlayStation had a reputation for great RPGs, but the selection on offer at launch for the PS2 was underwhelming. Best of the bunch was Summoner, a 3D Western action RPG from Volition. From Software were also quite prolific, building on the success of their King's Field series. They had 2 games ready for launch, Evergrace and Eternal Ring, although neither were received particularly well. Dark Cloud was originally intended to be a launch title, but slipped to later in the year. A Zelda-style JRPG, it was the best of its genre in 2000, although this wasn't the highest bar to clear. With retrospect, the launch titles for any console pale in comparison to those released once it finds its stride, and the PS2 was no exception. But the basic needs were covered, and many great games were in the pipeline. With the massive hype surrounding the launch of the PS2, Sony couldn't fail to make an impression. With a strong launch and practically no competition, Sony had put themselves in the driving seat for the next generation. The PS2 was a capable system with 3D graphics that looked truly next-gen. From the messy, brutal console wars of the previous generation, a clear victor had emerged. Sega had been bested and were planning their exit from the industry. The 3DO and Jaguar, nothing but a distant memory. Nintendo remained and were preparing their next-gen competitor, but they'd been in the shadow of the PlayStation for a while, and with the PS2's head start, they had a mountain to climb. Even the PC was feeling the effects of the PlayStation's influence. Although the last decade had been great for the adoption of the platform for games, the lack of a standard configuration made it difficult to target. There is something to be said for the simplicity of a console, and the monolithic hardware was starting to become more appealing for both consumers and developers. Microsoft knew this, and with their financial might, they saw an opportunity to challenge Sony's dominance in the console market. Essentially, a PC in a little black box, leveraging the rapid advancement of PC components into a standard configuration. As the PS2 launched in Japan, Microsoft announced the Xbox. It wouldn't release until next year, but Sony's monopoly was going to be tested.
Imagine if this was actually like the how an Xbox looked. If they kept this design for the Xbox, how fucking pitiful and cringe it would have been. Thank God, thank God they kept a box, because like imagine this was the Xbox.
And Nintendo were no longer guaranteed second place. It was an exciting time. Technology was cool, and there was nothing but blue skies on the horizon. The arrival of a new millennium had brought a feeling of optimism for the future. We could cast off the clumsy artifacts of the 20th century and embrace a new digital world. Mobile phones and the internet were starting to make a tangible impact on everyday life.
It's insane because like I was born in 1994, right? So I was 6 year old. Really didn't make a change or a difference to change millennia. I just wanted to point this out because like for me, as much as like for an adult, it must have been quite the fucking like symbolic moment, you know? Like even if you're like 14 or 15, right? But I was 6 years old and like I feel even like ashamed a little bit like that like I changed millennia. It fucking meant nothing to me.
We had SMS, we had MSN Messenger.
Oh, MSN was the best.
And bristled with opportunity.
So there was like just one thing about this period is that like staples lasted way longer. Like MSN Messenger or like the internet, like some things about the internet, like lasted way longer, and it wasn't like this fucking. And this is something that like a lot of people talk about when they talk about the old internet or the old era. It's just that like we had that fucking time to be late at an event, to be late at a trend, and we had the time to enjoy this trend, and we were not bombarded with like new things every single moment. It is a good thing that like we get like a lot of choices now. It's just bad that like we don't get like a place to stay, you know, when it comes to, I don't know, culturally, or like when it comes to people play like Pokemon, the same Pokemon games for like years, and it fucking like then it was their only game. It never was a problem. Now I think that like life changed, but it's just that like pacing became quite a fucking like thing, and maybe like we'll find like at least I found a way to fucking like to fucking be back in my old era while not suffering too much from like this like oversaturated like flood of information that you get every day. But yeah, like I don't even know where I'm going with this. Mm, anyway, good year this
This
year.
was the future, and we were living it. Thank you very much for watching.
This was actually quite a fucking video. Subscribe to Ahoy if you actually want to see more of this. Like this is actually really uh really interesting. Like let me just do my checkup real fast. Yeah, this was quite a fucking like thing. Um mm, mm, mm. Yeah.